So today we move on to mindset essentially. Um, and to me, this is probably the most important aspect of the entire MCA because we can have a good, um, we can have a good functional human system that kind of that kind of matches what each and every person is functionally capable of, but without the proper mindset, it's very, very, it's almost like everyone has the same computer, um, but what kind of software are we running, right? So that's basically the mindset part. So to me, mindset actually comes from definition. Um, how do we define things actually affect greatly what our mindsets are. Um, so to me, I I tend to question a lot, like what is the definition of something, right? For example, PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So it's actually defined as a disorder, right? Um, so then I question that a lot, right? And I say, okay, is it truly a disorder? And we share three examples of something like that, right? A 84-year-old Italian lady who, was panicking upon the start of my mom's central heater. And she said she says it sounded just like the World War II bomber, which ended 80 years ago, right? Is it a disorder or is it functional, right? The surfer guy with the phobia of getting into an elevator or airplane, but has no trouble surfing or sailboating. Is it functional or a disorder, right? To me, it is a completely functional system. All these cases, every case that I see, um, unless the hardware, these brain tissues or whatever are truly, truly damaged, they are actually running exactly how it's supposed to be. Based on the functional human system. So the very concept of what we're seeing, for example, stomach digestion issues. Okay, there is a condition called SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Um, is it a small intestine issue, right? Is it a what's the real definition of this thing, right? So everything that's once it's defined, there's a treatment that follows. Okay, if a person is diagnosed with PTSD or Parkinson, right, or OCD, right, um, and then once the label is given, which your present condition is OCD, for example, and then the whole chapter of treatments start to follow, right? Because that's essentially what we're doing in this modern time is to have a lookup table. And on the very left side of the lookup table is a condition like PTSD or OCD or something like that. And then you match into all kinds of treatment protocols or drugs or whatever, right? So to me, definitions are so, so, so important. And when I see PTSD not as a disorder, but as a function, everything changes. Everything. Okay. So let's say here we have the input system, right? This person experienced something traumatic, and that traumatic events actually created trigger entries in the limbic brain and trigger entries in the reflex brain, and eventually, um, the database in the left and right brain. Okay. And then the limbic brain and the reptilian brains are in the subconscious. So for a war veteran, for example, okay, any sound, any whistling of something, even quietness will trigger him. or her. So the vigilance is constant, 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 constant. The subconscious triggers in the limbic brain and the reptilian brain, which are, I call truth, the limbic brain, I call the truth noble horse, and the reptilian brain called the boundary noble horse, has to respond. They have to respond to it because they are noble horses. They're loyal protectors of our entire system. They have to respond. There's no condition for them to say, okay, let's see. Oh, this is the middle of the night and the doors are all closed and the windows have these bars and we have three security systems. Therefore, I don't have to respond. They don't work that way. So if we see this as a disorder, then the natural thing is to drug them, to really, really um, put this, these triggering system down. So then you have all these neurological drugs that dull the reaction or the perception or whatever. Okay. So I literally have a PTSD friend, who is a very, very dear friend of mine, very honorable man. Okay. He said, John, you know what? Before I want to kill myself and people, after all these drugs, I want to kill myself and others very, very slowly. That's the only change. Nothing else changed. Okay. Why? Because it's a disorder, right? And I'm not completely against drugs, but we need to understand this is a functional, the entire system is doing this based on the triggers that were installed per the traumatic event that happened. So when we have this definition changed, when we do not accept the definition of being a disorder, and honestly, if I have my loved ones or my close friends, having such a diagnosis, right, and they're really going down the drain, right, they don't have a good outlook, right, I will honestly ask them to take a different look. It's like, honestly, you're completely functional. You may not like how you function, but you're completely functional because of all these because of all these triggers within you. And then we take a completely different route. Rather than say, okay, we need to suppress these triggers to no end, we say, okay, we're gonna honor all these triggers because they used to save your life. And then we can design and develop other ways to truly update these triggers to say, okay, 20, 30, 80 years ago, these were life-saving triggers. They save our life. You hear this rumbling sound from the distance, you run for cover. That saves that saves people's lives. But it's been 80 years and we live in peacetime. We don't need this. We need to update these triggers. So then the path is about updating. It's not about suppressing because suppressing these triggers create even more issues. So the definition needs to be, in my opinion, right? If we're in this field and we're trying to empower, you know, and we're trying to work with people, we need to look at the very, very definition um, of whatever people have. And then we will have a different mindset. And honestly, when people have a different mindset, they're supremely empowered, right? So to me, when I tell somebody to say, you don't have a disorder, period. You have a completely functional system. You got to honor your hypervigilance. You got to honor your phobia. There's a reason why you don't go into elevator or airplane is you have this trigger to say, you know, I'll never go into a place where I have no control. Isn't that the greatest protector of your entire system? So all of a sudden, instead of saying, okay, I have a part of me that I need to get rid of, and some people use, some people use the term evil. Okay, I've been asked many, many times, John, can you take this evil part out of me? I say, you don't have an evil part. You have a loyal protector inside of you. It's not doing what you want at this point, but it's loyal. It doesn't know the time has passed. It has no concept of time and space. It cannot have. Okay? Imagine in our subconscious, there's a concept of time and space. Then the system will not work because they need to react at the very second or the very millisecond these things happen. They cannot judge. So the very definition change enable a mindset change. And to me, that's a paradigm shift. And people literally change their, honestly, they change overnight. And they change, in that very second, they switch to say, yeah, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. This used to save my life. The same hypervigilance in the battlefield when bullets are shooting over my head saved my life. It doesn't know I'm not in the war zone anymore. But even in a so-called safe society, the stimulus are the same. You go into a restaurant and people walking behind you, right? You hear all these clinking, clunking, the door open, noise and everything else. They get triggered, right? They drive on the highway, right? And all of a sudden they see moving cars and cars are going left and right. Some people are cutting, some people are speeding, and hear now loud noises and stuff like that. They get triggered. The trigger database doesn't know place. Okay, it triggers based on attributes. Okay, so to me, this is a fundamental mindset that I have is to say, okay, everything that I see, I verify and check definition. Because when I do that, I start to say, what's the attribute of this condition? Okay, PTSD, for example, right? They're triggers. And how are these triggers installed? Based on the prior experience. How long ago was that? 20, 30, 80 years ago. They're not being updated. How can we update them? We update them by reveal that we can still love, that we're still safe to love anytime we want. We, 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 we resolve this, we transform all these triggers, we update all these triggers with a tremendous sense that I still have a choice. We can break that loop, okay? And we cover this in the functional human system to a large extent. And we will have, when I cover all the topics within MCA, I will go back to cases and really put all these things together. Okay. And our mindset determines reality. Okay. How we perceive the world creates the world. And we'll go through the rest of the slides. Hopefully this becomes very, very clear. Again, please do not trust me. Okay. Please analyze yourself, create your own framework. Okay. We all have a framework. We rarely examine our frameworks, whether they're consistent, whether they're empowered, whether they're serving us or not, right? Um, Nobody can copy another framework. It doesn't work that way. It has to come from internal. So the first mindset I like to share is the concept of help. I spent a few years getting rid of help from my vocabulary because I think help is extremely problematic for anybody in the healing field, anybody who want to share anything. Okay. Help implies a level of, it's like I'm helping you. What does that mean? That means I know better. I have more resources. I have more experience, right? And I have expectations. And to me, if anybody can help another person, this world will be dramatically different. Okay. But most of us are parents, and parents have kids, right? Can we help our kids? Can we truly help anybody else? Okay. Um, Again, based on functional human system, all these databases needs to be updated by oneself. Okay. Nobody else can wave a magic wand or insert a few needles and say, "Oh, your out of date databases are updated." It doesn't work that way. I certainly wish it worked that way, but it does not work that way. So when I was before COVID, I have many open clinics, and in all these clinics, I invited it's open clinic to anybody, okay, patients, practitioners of all different kinds. Okay. Um, and it was running well, and occasionally I would get calls and say, "Okay, John, I cannot come in to help you," and I say, "Well, when you come in, there's no help. Okay, there's no help. We don't help anybody else. Okay, we don't help our patients. We're not there to help people. We're there to share a firsthand experience. We're there to be a lighthouse. Okay, we don't want to be a candle in the wind." Okay? Um, so I'll cover this a little bit more later. Okay, but the general concept for me is I do not help. Okay, I may I may volunteer, and the reason is I'm seeking opportunities to share my firsthand experience because to me that's extremely rewarding. Okay, am I helping anybody? You know, um, I don't know. Okay. So the only thing I can do is to say, if I have 20 minutes with somebody, I will try to maximize that 20 minutes um, to my best ability to do what? To share um, what I believe is empowering. And that itself is rewarding. Okay. Whether that person will receive this and change, that's not up to me. And what's interesting is this very mindset actually is extremely empowering for a lot of people because I'm basically saying, well, it's your choice. Give it a shot, right? Try this out. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, throw it away. Without the sense of helping another person, we have very pure intention or as pure intention as we can without a whole lot of expectation. So this can be applied to anything. Okay, for example, you work to support a family. Are you helping your family? Are you helping your husband and your kids or your wife and your kids? Honestly, that to me is the very oftentimes that's the very problem that creates endless issues within a family. Everybody is sacrificing, everybody is helping, everybody is doing things for others. So the next concept, after help naturally arise is do everything 100% for oneself. When I was given this similar presentation a long time ago, a lady asked me, it's like, okay, John, you gotta be kidding me, right? Do everything 100% for myself? I have a 4-month-old baby. When I change diapers, I'm doing this for whom? And I say, well, give it a shot. Next time you change the diaper, do it 100% for yourself and see how it feels. Try it for a week. In 3 days, she actually called me. So you know what, John? This is funny. I don't hate my husband anymore. And she realized that every time she changed diaper, in the back of her mind, it's like, why is this my whatever job? Why every time the dad comes in and change diaper, it's almost like a party. They were having fun in there. So it's actually very interesting. Apply this, do everything 100% for ourselves. Apply this to everything we do. Cook a meal. Stop cooking meals for the family. Just cook the meal 100% for yourself. Why? Because you want to serve your family. You're doing this 100% for yourself. You go to work 100% for yourself. Not for the company, not for your family. 100% for yourself. Wash the dishes 100% for yourself. And see how that changed our lives. To me, this changed my life dramatically. I don't have time bombs anymore. I don't feel like I'm sacrificing for somebody with all these expectations, even though I feel like I'm so unconditional. I'm building time bombs. One day when the people I do things for are not reciprocating, right? That that blew up my life. I experienced this. So to me, do everything 100% for oneself is critical. Okay. We may say, John, I have no choice. I got married and I have kids. Now I have all these responsibilities. What choice do I have? I have to do it. I'm not doing this 100% for myself for sure. Right. And I will always say, you do have a choice. You can be irresponsible. So the entire MCA is really a lot of pieces that come together, okay, and cross-reference and stuff like that. Okay. So we cover the functional human system, we cover the channels. We're talking about mindset today. I'll be talking about Tuina, neuromuscular system and cultivation, and probably a bit more than that. But anyway, the goal is to say, to have everything kind of interconnected, and how they apply to the cases. I want to share this overview effect with you guys. Okay. Overview effect is, you can Google this, is when astronauts go up space and they look back, okay, and see this blue planet, like a blue marble, right? So tiny and small. It changed their entire paradigm. So when they come back to Earth, some actually thrive, some are miserable, just absolutely miserable. Okay, went into addictions and just nightmares. Okay? And what happened, right? So to me, we all have a framework. Okay, we all have a system. Okay, uh, we all educated. We all have our past experience. We're all raised differently and different culture, whatever. Right. So we all have our framework. Okay, that one look back, right, by astronauts at the blue marble, right, changed their entire system because all of a sudden what we learn, what we're used to are don't apply anymore. So it's almost like our old system gets knocked out, and in its place it's a vacuum. Okay. Um, some people were able to continue build a new framework. Some people continue to search for a framework, um, and when we live without a good framework, it's actually very, very difficult to live. And what's most interesting to me is all these astronauts. They have all the knowledge they need. They have all the counseling, all the preparation in the world. And they are the top, 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 top people in the world. They're well prepared to go into space and to turn around and look at the blue marble. And yet, majority of them experience this overview effect one way or another. What does that tell me? When I first learned about this, it just means knowledge is nothing compared to firsthand experience. Knowledge is nothing compared to firsthand experience. It's completely useless. They are all well prepared. They know they're going to look at it. They have pictures of it everywhere. They have videos of this. They are well prepared. And yet, when they look back by themselves, they change. So to me, in MCA, or if we're, in the so-called caring professional, I guess, profession, right, career, um, I really, we need to keep this in mind. How can we provide ourselves and others the experience, the opportunity to experience things firsthand? To me, that is critical. So when we have this mindset, we will stop educating people. We'll start telling people what to do, but to create opportunities for people to feel, to truly feel. Because it's that feel, that first-hand experience that will truly change people. Nothing else. Okay. Knowledge itself does not change people very much. Okay. If we look at this entire functional human system, we will know why. Because knowledge itself is 1/4 of the entire brain system. And this is honestly the least reliable one. Because in our knowledge database, there are plenty of conflicts. Okay. The next thing is sympathy, empathy, compassion. Okay. So in our field, there's a term wounded healers. I was taking a Tuina class, and the teacher, two teachers, they were greatly wounded, physically and emotionally, and yet they're teaching. Um, they're providing services. They're providing healing work. And at first, I thought that was what can be more noble than this? People sacrificing themselves physically and emotionally for the benefit of other people. What can be more noble than that? And as after a month or two, I changed my mind. It's like, what can be more cruel than this? I want to be in this field. I want my kids to be in this field. I want everybody, who aspire to be in this field to be in this field. But if this is the outcome in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, there's something dramatically wrong in this, how we practice, right? So I started to analyze this thing, and sympathy, empathy, and compassion is what I come up with. then I understand why do people get wounded in this field? Because we use sympathy. Okay. Let me first talk about empathy. Empathy is our ability to mirror, to feel. Okay. So empathy is like a mirror. Things come in front of it, it shows up in the mirror. Things gone, it's supposed to be gone. Okay. Or it's like a scale, right? We step on it, it shows our weight. We step off, it shows zero. That's how empathy is supposed to work. Is our ability to feel, to sense how things are at the moment. And some people have extremely high empathy skills. And most of these, a lot of people who have childhood trauma actually have tremendous empathy skills. Why? Because they have to. They have to be able to say, okay, is my dad drunk by the sound of the car door closing? How about the steps, the sound of his walking in into the house? Okay, all these senses are heightened to detect what's going on. What am I supposed to do? Should I go hide? Or should I, go to the door and say hi? So empathy is really, in my opinion, okay, empathy is really our ability to feel what's going on around us, physically, emotionally, and maybe even beyond that. Why? Because we need to. Okay. So empathy, in my opinion, is a great, great, great skill for people in the so-called healing field because we're able to feel. So mirror itself or scale itself is not a problem. Okay. We just have this ability to see clearly, to feel deeply. The issue is sympathy. Sympathy is basically a judgment. Okay. And and this happens very often. Okay. Um, I remember I talked to a lady, and eventually she told me she had cancer. Um, and and I didn't say I'm sorry. Right? So she continued, and then we actually had a great conversation. And she said, and she said, John, you know why I actually don't want to, I don't normally let people know I had cancer. I said, why? She said, because people would tell me they're so sorry. But her cancer actually changed her life. To her, the cancer was a pivotal point in her life. She despised sympathy. And I know a young man, and I think, he was 16 when he was brought in by her mom, um, who studies Chinese medicine as well. And he had, birth defects or something like that. So he had, when I saw him, he's probably have, 15, if not 20 surgeries already. He essentially grew up in the hospital. And he told me too. He said, I don't want sympathy. Okay. Every time we sympathize with somebody, we'll basically say, I feel so sorry for you. You are a victim of things that should not have happened. We take the power away from this person and we sink ourselves to to a level we don't want to sink in. We are invested in this judgment holds. So if we have good empathy ability and we sympathize, then the things that show up in the mirror do not go away when these things go away. In Chinese medicine, we call this evil qi. Okay, it's like, oh, these patients come in and they leave these evil qi. And to me, They did not leave evil chi. You, we, the people who believe there's such a thing as evil chi, hold it. It's the same thing. This happens in any tradition, okay, whether you believe in these things or not. Okay. Why? Because our brain, again, our mindset, right, our definition creates reality. So to me, the key really is about compassion. Okay, so if we use our empathy skills along with compassion, well, what is compassion? Right? To me, compassion is just without judgment. Okay, compassion cannot be defined. It's just how we connect to another person without judgment, the best we can, without judgment, as neutral as possible. Okay. Do not, and this is such a habit, right? It's such a like a cultural habit. Right? You hear something like, "Oh, I have cancer. Oh, I'm so sorry." You know, my mom had the surgery. Oh, I'm so sorry. Right? Sympathy. It's a sympathy based, highly sympathy based world right now. And I do agree. Sympathy is probably the easiest way to make friends, to feel like, oh, okay, we're in this together, right? But we're in this together all without power, all disempowered. We're not victims. Okay, when things happen, that doesn't mean that's the end. Right? So to me, this is very, very important for my clinic. Okay, in my clinic, I actually have a sign on my door and say, "This is a sympathy-free clinic. I do not sympathize people because I do want to empower people. People should be empowered." Okay, and sympathy takes the power away. So if we can do empathy plus compassion, without judgment, without sympathy, right? To me, hopefully, we'll have a world in time, maybe 30 years, maybe 100 years, maybe even longer. Hopefully, there will be no wounded healers anymore. Okay. Another mindset is I don't know. I think in our profession, the tendency is we need to know. We need to be somehow, we need to know. We need to be the authority because we need to know. Okay. I remember a person was referred to me. She's a psychologist or psychotherapist, and she has SIBO, right? Highly recommended by another acupuncturist. And she came to me and said, so and so refer me to you. And she said I shouldn't tell you my condition in the first place. I said, okay, lay down. And I scan her channels and say, well, do you have digestion issue? And her eyes actually lit up and said, yeah, I have SIBO. And I look at her and say, what is SIBO? And she was so surprised. She said, you don't know what SIBO is? I said, I don't. I really don't. And she's like, and you're highly recommended? I said, well, maybe you should leave. Maybe I don't deserve this, recommendation. And then she said, SIBO is small intestine bacteria overgrowth. And once I hear it, right, and I look at her, and the next question I ask is like, do you have a lot of injustice? And she literally, went into a different space. And then came back and said, yes, I do. I said, that is your issue. When you have a lot of injustice, you're in fight and flight. And if you're in fight and flight, you're not supposed to be able to digest well. And my normal clinic hours is at least an hour, if not 90 minutes. She actually left within 15 minutes. And the next time she came in, I couldn't, I honestly do not recognize her. My eyesight is actually not that good, so I remember people by their posture. I remember people by their energetic level. Okay. The next time she came in, she was very, very different. She wasn't a victim anymore. Because by, within that 15 minutes, I basically told her, it's like, okay, if you're willing to address your sense of injustice, then we can work together. Otherwise, there's no point in working together because I will not treat you. I will not treat your SIBO because it's useless. And she knows because she's been going to specialists, going to whatever. So I don't know, to me, is very natural. I have no issue to say I don't know. I've never heard of this ever. Please tell me what it is. And then maybe we'll go somewhere. Isn't this interesting? We go to school, try to be knowledgeable, try to be experts. Okay. Honestly, in this AI age, it doesn't mean anything anymore. Anybody can 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 get AI out, right? And put in SIBO and you get so much information. But the key is how do we connect to that person? Okay. So eyes level. Okay. So I'm an acupuncturist, but I rarely use needles. But I do use my hands. I do a lot of, hands-on work. And to me, one of the most important things is, for example, when I'm massaging people and I train out people and I move shoulders or whatever I do, or I scan channels, I do not look at I do not look at my hands. To me, this is critical. Okay. And I try to maintain my eyes to be level when I do things. Okay. Because then I have a really, really good boundary. My energy doesn't leak out of my hands, and client energy does not get into my body. Okay. We create a good boundary right at the interface, right at where my hands and the body touches. Okay. When I was teaching, I would, you know, put my hand on my students' arms or something like that, and I say, "See, now this is when my eyes are level." Okay. And then I say, okay, this is when I look at my hands. Okay. Many students basically just jump out of the table, right? Because they can feel this. Okay. Every time we look at our hands, we're actually transmitting energy. Okay. And energies are bidirectional. Okay. There's no such thing as, okay, I am channeling whatever, and therefore it goes one direction. No, energy goes both directions. So eyes level. Okay. So, many of us are hands-on people, and every time our hands are on somebody else, try to, get our eyes to be level, okay, rather than looking into our hands. Okay. Respect versus reverence. And this is specific to Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine has many of these theories, yin yang theories, five element theories, Zhang Fu theory, which are the yeah, I mean, Chinese medicine has so many theories. Okay. And to me, they are revered. Okay. To me, Chinese medicine, the way some people practice Chinese medicine is really like almost like a religion. Honestly, it's probably even worse than a religion. Right? Because they will quote and they will say, okay, based on five element theory, for example, this is how it's supposed to be, and that's it. Okay. So it's reverence. Okay. Reverence doesn't get us very, very far. And what's true, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, how can it be still true today? Is it still true today? We have to really, really look into this. Yin Yang theory is based on the sun rises and then the sun sets. The spring comes and then eventually the spring comes again. That's how the yin yang theory is. You see this yin and yang, yin turns into yang, and yang turns into yin through all its gradients and stuff like that. That's how the yin yang theory is built. Until one realizes, the sun actually never rises and never sets either. There's no four seasons. It's all because the earth, rotate all by, within its own axis and rotates around the sun that creates all these things. The ancients observe and they build a system, they build a philosophical system. They're trying to explain things. To me, that's the thing we want to treasure. Their relentless pursuit of essence. They're trying to figure things out. Those are the things that we should absolutely respect and honor. Instead of revering and adhering and really like uphold their whatever they're finding so tightly as if that's absolute truth. That doesn't that sound like religion? Right? And to me, by doing that, we are dishonoring them. If ancients come back today, they will look at the system and say, you know what? Throw it away. It's time for an update. Okay, this is very similar to our functional human system where the triggers are out of date. Okay? And when we revere certain things, they become protocol. Somehow somebody wrote this down and say, okay, when you have a stomach issue, these are the points that you should do, and these are the formulas that you should give. Okay, and because we revere this thing so much, they become protocol, and we apply them over and over and over and over and over again. And this is exactly what I saw when I was working in the school clinic. You go into these files, 1 inch thick, and they're filled with the same protocol, same prescription over and over and over again for years. It's ridiculous. But when we start to go say, okay, this may be a baseline, this may be something, and we get into a feedback system, then it's completely different. Then we start to evolve. Okay. The protocol system is basically a point and shoot camera that you have no control. The only control you have is is click the shutter button. That's it. A feedback system is there are at least three controls for the exposure. And you take one photo, and it's too bright or too dark, and you change. Eventually, you get it right. That's a feedback system. And our body, our entire body, is filled with these systems. The neuromuscular system is a feedback system. Okay, our entire brain system, our body system, our mind, body, and spirit system is essentially it's a gigantic feedback system. So when we, put this wide open, then it's very, very different. Okay, then we see ourselves, we see all the so-called ancient knowledge, ancient wisdom, very, very differently. Okay, I'm not trying to trash anybody, but revering things get us into trouble. In Chinese medicine, if it goes down, to me, it's because we're not willing to change. We're not willing to say it's time to revise it. It's time to honor their true spirit. Okay. And when we do protocols, we treat signs and symptoms. Okay. There's no different than Western medicine. There's a high, blood pressure is high, treat high blood pressure. Blood pressures are high due to many, many potential factors. Okay. When we treat signs and symptoms, honestly, this is what I, being drilled at. in Chinese medicine school. It's like treat signs and symptoms, treat signs and symptoms, and that's it. So it's like this is crazy. You know, if this is my mom and my dad and my kids and my family and my close friends, would I do this to them? I would never do this to anybody that's close to me, but yet we're supposed to treat our patients, you know, just signs and symptoms. Right? So on the side, I do treat my patients like my parents. Okay, to me, that's my mindset. Okay, anybody who I come in contact with, who I had the opportunity to share something, okay, they're my parents, and that actually facilitate a lot of these mindsets. Okay, if I'm in front of my parents or my people who I love, right, I care, I truly care. Then I don't need to know. I have time to understand, right? Yeah. Okay. Another big concept that I have or mindset that I have is reveal versus heal. Okay. To me, this is huge. Okay. Heal means we are broken. You know, we're Humpty Dumpty, and we're broken into pieces, right? And we endlessly seeking healing, right? We want to be put back together again. Reveal means there's something within us that is still intact, that the function is still there. Okay. To me, the very fact that somebody can have PTSD means they're functional. Okay. If a person is not functional, you can't have PTSD because it doesn't hold these traumatic events. Okay. So in the clinic, I always attempt to reveal something first. Always. You know, no matter how big or how small, reveal something first. Maybe we reveal the reason why something is problematic. Why do you have these signs and symptoms? For example, the example I just shared, right? SIBO is because this person has long held injustice. And because of that, flight and flight all the time. And because of that, digestion cannot go on. It's very, to me, that's for that person, it's revealing because she was trying to heal from her SIBO. But when you reveal the SIBO was actually related to her decades and years of experiences, um, everything changes. Okay. So to me, in the clinic, what I try to do is to reveal first and then maybe heal. A lot of times healing wasn't even necessary after revealing because just naturally resolve it. Okay. And to me, if we take care of our body and we listen to our mind and we honor our body and mind, um, we, you know, the spirit just kind of takes care of itself, you know, um, because the spirits are always, to me, the spirits never had an issue. Nobody has a spiritual problem. Okay. Nobody has a spiritual issue. The religion like to argue against it and say, well, you need us, the spiritual brokers, to get you, you know, to a different place because, you know, you guys are all born with spiritual problems. Okay. I beg to differ. Okay. And I think that's a really wonderful way to get people to stay in line, right? And take their power away. Nobody has a spiritual issue. So in this diagram, okay, when we honor all these green boxes, which are databases, when we can have all our all this entire functional human system run in harmony, we are, I mean, honestly, when our vision, okay, the midbrain, the heart is always golden because it has no future and no past, okay? And we always have a choice to love and to connect right at this moment. Anytime, anyone has this choice, right? Can't take this away. This is our spirituality, pure and simple. Okay? We don't need to go high places, and we don't need to be, we don't need to be born with some kind of a miracle in order to achieve spiritual enlightenment. Right? It's always there. It's always with us. Okay? That's the revealing part, and that's the part that enlightened people tell us across times, across different places. Okay, different races, different, just to me, it's very, very obvious. Right? Okay, intention, expectation. Okay, this is so when we do everything 100% for ourselves, we have tremendous intention, right? With minimal expectation. To me, these expectation creates a lot of suffering, a lot of anxieties, or to me, anxiety is essentially is the magnitude of our expectation. The higher the expectation, the higher the anxiety, right? So if we can just purely focus on our intention, um, the anxiety will actually naturally go down. Okay. I actually duplicate this that I need to modify. Okay. So pain to me is a message. I really rarely address pain. And, so in Chinese medicine, pain just means blockage. Something got blocked, and there's a flood, and the flood is called pain. Okay. So if somebody's face is swollen, that means something is not flowing properly through whatever it needs, the pathway it needs to, it should be flowing. Okay. So pain to me is a message. So treating pain just doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. And what's interesting is pain is actually one of the clinical indications that needs to be resolved not too long ago, maybe 50 years ago, 60 years ago in the US. And after it becomes one of the clinical indications, along with like temperatures and heart rate and I forgot the others. Then it can be medicated. Okay, the oxytocin, many very, very strong drugs can be prescribed legally, medically, then actually results in over drugging, right, over medicated, and creates a lot of addictions because all these painkillers are highly addictive. Okay, and today the United States is filled with drug-related issues. A lot of it are coming out of the medical system, create people that are dependent on drugs. And when they can get it, right, they go to street drugs, which are cheaper, and then you create all these rehab centers and treatment centers. Then all of a sudden you become an ecosystem. Okay. So I honor pain, right? And pain is a message that tells me where to go. And and this is where Tui Na comes in, right? So when I do Tui Na, like a massage through entire body, right? I'm actively looking for pain spots. A lot of people have pain spots that they are fully unaware of, fully unaware of. It's like, oh my gosh, how can it be so painful here? I never, never, ever feel this way. I didn't know it was there, right? And why? Because our posture will actually hide it. Okay. So a lot of people have forward shoulders. And there's a point called pericardium 1. okay, it's in between the fourth and fifth rib, okay, right at the center line, essentially. Okay. And that point, for a lot of people, are excruciatingly painful. And in Chinese medicine, that point actually creates what we call the liver qi stagnation, which I will cover in later talks. But essentially, it's a blockage of the liver channel into what we call the lung channel. Okay? And that blockage was necessary every time we are suppressing ourselves. Okay, for example, I mean, the face of an authority who has absolute control of my well-being, even my livelihood, right? So I have to kind of suppress myself in front of this authority figure. Okay, then I need to create this blockage, which basically say, okay, liver, take it easy, okay? Because if my liver channel runs up into my lung channel thrivingly, then I will speak my mind. I will say no. I will object. I will find issues. I become a troublemaker. I become a misfit in that system. Okay. So a lot of times we have to, you know, get in line, right? But if we do this over and over and over and over again for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it becomes a permanent chronic blockage. And it actually creates pain. And the body's respond to pain is actually, to contract, right? To shrink, right? And to get the shoulder forward and to hide that pain. So a lot of people have pain along that area. Right? And that area covers 50%, if not more, of the breast cancer. Okay. That area is where energy is blocked and is not going through. In Chinese medicine, it's called deficiency. Okay. That area does not have adequate energy to go through to flush things out. Okay. Um, so very interesting, right? So pain, the uncovering of basically essentially all the pain spots in the body to me is very, very important. Okay. And posture to me, I'm actually writing something for a project, what I call the Better Posture Project, because I believe posture posture is our relationship with gravity. Okay. There is no such thing as a good posture or what's the best posture possible. To me, it's really our relationship with gravity. Some are more costly, some are less. Okay, and relaxation is really how that relationship is. Okay, if we have, if we're standing, right, on solid ground, and our weights are evenly just distributed along our both feet, and our knees are actually soft, our pelvis is level. Okay, our shoulders are actually down. Okay, then the energy is actually then we're actually relaxed. Why? Because it doesn't cost a whole lot of energy. Our our structure or our fascia system, okay, this tensegrity system is holding us with minimum effort. Everything is well balanced within that system. Okay, versus the same person standing the same way, with the phone and the head down to tend to the phone. It is, the posture changes because the load changes. The head move forward, the load is different for that entire posture. Then how's our relationship right now? Are we more or less relaxed? Is our back tighter, right? Or if we are folding our hands when we talk to people, we're adding a load to the front of our body, which the body has to resolve, right? And over time, people develop humps on the shoulders or the upper back, right, to compensate that folding of hands, folding of arms. So to me, a lot of people are exercising while they're talking by putting their arms in the front, by folding their arms. They're actually actively exercising. So that's how I look at it. Okay. When we look at it this way, people are far more mindful of, what their relationship is with with gravity at any moment in time. So we kind of touched on this already, diagnosis, right? SIBO, phobia, PTSD, OCD, and narcissist, whatever. I mean, we have all kinds of labels. Okay, and each label essentially is the search item for a lookup table of all kinds of treatments. Okay, so in the clinic, I tend not to diagnose. I don't feel diagnosis has real values. I just don't feel diagnoses are very, very empowering. Okay. Instead, I tend to look for attributes for whatever condition the person is having, right? What's the attribute? You know, I think the very first example I shared was a three-generation acupuncturist who had years and decades of high blood pressure, right? And she's being treated, by countless doctors, very, very high level, or at least high, the so-called high level doctors, right? Because she has all these access. So when I had a chance to see her, um, I didn't even have my license yet, and I look at attributes, right? I don't look at the condition because if the condition is high blood pressure, right, that's the diagnosis, and countless people or many people have looked at it and treated her. Right? So I look at the attributes. Right? Why would the blood pressure to be high? Right? For example, fight and flight. If a person is in fight and flight, if the dog starts chasing me and my neurological mode goes into fight and flight, my blood pressure goes high. That's a very natural functional thing to do for the body. And this person has been in that mode for a long time. Why? And one of the channels, when it's not moving through, when it's not moving through smoothly, when it's blocked, will create this fight and flight response. And that channel is called gallbladder channel. And when I scan that channel, I find a blockage. And from that blockage, I discover, she had a scar for a long time. And when that scar is resolved and her channels are restored, right, her high blood pressure condition went away. So to me, um, the understanding or even the concept of say, oh, I want to find these attributes. Right? Even that simple mindset creates a whole new world, right? And I can't stress this enough, right? Because it's so easy in the I actually have a conversation with somebody who was on the testing committee, okay, for acupuncture, licensing test. And I say, well, are we truly expecting people to to practice this way, to have a career like this by having a question and always have a right answer, right? And she actually said no. Right? She said, no, no, that's different. And I said, well, then why can't we, get people out of school and truly certify them, right? Not based on these, like lookup table kind of a thing, right? Like every question has a right answer, right? Because can we move on to an attribute more like an attribute centric system, right? But anyway, that's a separate discussion. And I honestly feel like if we just change our mindset a little bit, we're going to start asking different questions, and different questions lead to different answers, and get us to, in my opinion, will be, a much better place. Um, this is very similar. Okay, this is similar to pain and suffering. Is again, I don't look at suffering. I look at the attributes of suffering. Why do people truly suffer? Um, and again, the functional human system come into play. I tend to I I don't have really good memory, and I don't memorize things. And to me, it's like, why do I have to memorize? I'm kind of lazy in that way. Um, but the thing that I learn it fairly broadly. Okay, and I will learn, for example, all the fallacies um, for our left and right brain. For example, confirmation bias, right, and stuff like that. Okay. Um, And once I read them through and it kind of makes sense to me, it's kind of in my system, but with a very faint link, right? Um, so I have these kind of broad and kind of shallow ideas or links or nodes or concepts and stuff like that, right? Um, so my effort, I guess, is really on how I can link them together, right? Through talking, through understanding, through scanning of channels, through discovering of attributes, and somehow it links to something, and then I can always go narrow and deep. Okay, so to me, I I know there, to be a good student, we need to be deep for sure. I'm not sure about narrow. But um, but for me, I think my one of my strong suit is I have very shallow and relatively broad knowledge or concepts. Okay, J bracelet. Okay, so this is another thing that sort of marketing and definition and cause a whole lot of problems. My mom had a frozen shoulder maybe 30, 40 years ago, and I begged her for almost a decade before she removed her J bracelet. Okay. And now she's 93, 94, and she has no frozen shoulder issue. And the myth is J bracelet, especially the most expensive ones, will protect a person. Okay. But in reality, it's just the opposite. The person who wears the J bracelet will be actively protecting the J bracelet all the time. And therefore, the person may appear to be safer, okay, more careful. But when a person is protecting the J bracelet all the time, what happens is the pec muscle or the elbow needs to get closer to the body. Right? And that action, okay, that little force, right, to keep the elbow close to the body over time, right? It's like the brace put on the teeth, right? Eventually change the entire teeth structure, right? It's the same thing. So to me, again, this goes back to definition, right? And after my mom's, finally took her out and recovered from, you know, the so-called frozen shoulder, I actually removed quite a few J bracelets. So nowadays we have, instead of J bracelet, we have these, um, little watches and stuff like that. And people are still wearing these things, and it's really a matter like how do you protect these things? Um, and as a manual body worker, right, it's actually very easy to tell. The left side or whichever side that wears these things, tend to be a little bit tighter. If that's the case, you know, it's to me, it's important to let the person know it's like, you've been protecting this, and because you're protecting this, it's it starts a domino effect, right? And all the way to your, to your elbow, to your shoulder, to your scapular, to your core, and and to me, this is a very vivid and frequently encountered example of people protecting what they're wearing and cause a whole lot of issues. Yeah. And we talk about the evil chi, okay? To me, it's a concept, okay? In school, there's plenty of professors, spreading this evil chi concept, right? And to me, they are really the least healthy people in the whole school, um, because they don't need to see patients. Okay, the patient doesn't even have to come in. Okay, the very thought of evil chi coming, with patients is enough to upset their own system, right? Um, So what do we do, right? So to me, it's really like how are we? If we are caring for ourselves, if we're loving and we honor ourselves, right? Um, we're our energy will be running, at optimal states, and that's it. Okay, we don't run in sympathy mode. Okay, the fear of evil chi is sympathy. It's a judgment. Um, Chinese has an idiom called frog in a well. Okay. It's a derogatory term. It's like, oh, you're just a frog in a well. Okay. It just means like you're just full of it. Okay. You don't know what's going on in this world. Okay. And to me, we all are. Okay. We are all frogs in a well. Okay. So to me, all truths are true. Okay. And to me, this is probably one of the best ways to communicate with other people. All truths are true. People have religious differences, political differences, value differences, cultural differences. Why? Because they're in their well. Why are they in their well? Because, the religion, for example, are heavily depending on where you're born. If you're born, 500 miles away, you're in a different well. And you will have a completely different sets of truth. And they're true to you. So the very concept or the very mindset, all truths are true, is actually very interesting. It allows me to be as judgment free as possible. I'm not trying, I no longer, is predisposed to judge other people based on my truth. And as a result, I can remain neutral and say, your truth is true to you, and mine is mine. And can we exchange that? Can we share that? To me, that's the very foundation of understanding, right? Yeah. And all emotions are true. This to me is the most critical thing the entire world. This, I mean, honestly, if this message gets out, this will change the world. All emotions are true. We are so filled with problems in this world, depression, anxiety, the whole nine yards, since elementary schools, because emotions they're positive and they're negative emotions. And there's this thing called the emotional intelligence. Okay, the people who are emotionally intelligent will have, will have, really good control of their emotions. To me, these are just poison to the entire humanity almost. Because every case that I see, every case that I share, okay, people with PTSD, people with, went through World War II and panic, people with, phobia and da da da, all their fear and emotion and panic and whatever, vigilance, they are true. It's not negative or positive. They are just true. Why? Because they have these triggers that were installed by their life experience. Unless we can say, okay, there will be no more negative life experiences for humanity, we cannot say these emotions are not true. And once these triggers are installed, they continue to protect this person loyally. And all these triggers have three properties: protective, persistent means they don't go away, they don't get there's no expiration date, and they're global. They're matching attributes. Okay? They don't say it's not because my dad beat me, so I install these triggers, then all these triggers will only respond to my dad. No, these triggers will respond to anybody, anywhere, anytime who possesses my dad's attribute. For example, authority figure. For example, having control of my well-being. They will trigger. Or anybody who raised their voice. Or anybody who, you know, don't act consistently. And this mindset to me is life-changing for a lot of people. All emotions are true. Because when we have this very mindset, we start to respect and honor and embrace so tenderly of all our emotions. To me, this is the very beginning of self-love, unconditional self-love. If we don't do this, we're not loving ourselves unconditionally. It's almost very easy for us to say, oh, you have all these emotions. I empathize with you. I understand. Keep telling me. I'm here to listen. But when it comes from us, we're so critical of them. Why? Because they're positive and negative ones. And the more we think our emotions are negative and try to suppress them, the louder they get. This is why I call our emotional, the limbic brain, the truth noble horse, because it's telling the truth all the time. They're the most loyal guard dog. Another concept is how long is now? How long is now? There's a book called The Power of Now. Right? And we all aspire to live in the present moment, live in the now, present moment. How long is now? To me, now is as long as the trigger lives. As long as the trigger lives. The lady who got panic still lives in World War II 80 years ago. PTSD is the same. They still live in the now of that entire event. So in our subconscious, there's no concept of time. So now is a conscious concept. So we always live in the now. Some are very short, some are extremely long. And they can be parallel. We can live in parallel nows. So the goal for so-called enlightenment or free or epiphany is really to shorten that time and really to close down the out-of-date nows. So it's interesting, right? So this little concept now, because we can only change things that's happening now. We can't change the past, right? And we can't really change the future. We can't really generate the future. The only thing we can change is now, right? So when we have this mindset that we always, always, always live in the now, even though the trauma happens 80 years ago or however long ago, we're still in that now. As a result, we can still change it. And people will say, John, I can't change it. How can I possibly change it? And I would say, do you watch movies? When you watch movies, do you go, do you go along with the movies? Do you get excited, scared, blood pumping and whatever with the movie? So yeah, I do. Then you absolutely can change yourself. You have all the functions to do that. So in closing, I want to have this concept of, to me, I held this mindset for a while. Relentless pursuit of essence, not excellence, essence. And to me, a lot of the essence are just attributes, right? So in my relentless pursuit of essence, I tend to break things down into attributes. And when I break things down into attributes, I begin to feel closer to what's going on. And attributes are far more objective, um, and easier for people to accept and resolve. You know, um, it's not personal, right? Or less personal. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, I want to mention this, right? So and here this is Picasso's bull, right? He started with, extreme detail, fine muscles, musculature, and eventually it's just the essence of a bull, right? Um, and to me, this is extremely rewarding and very, very interesting. It allows us to truly look inside and say, what is going on, and be able to change course, right? Reorient ourselves if necessary. For what? For a better life, for a better path, right? And I think that's ultimately is what living is for, is to be able to reorient ourselves through life. It's like hopping on a plane from San Francisco to London or to France, right? The airplane changes course all the time. They need to reorient themselves in order to get to the destination. Okay. Life doesn't have a fixed path, right? So, well, so it's 8:31. Okay, so it's 90 minutes. So this is my presentation today. Any questions or comments?
Hey, John. Hey,
Hey,
good
Albert.
talk.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess like today we talk about PTSD, right? When I listen to the way you're describing it, the things that pop into my head is like what makes an experience traumatic, right? So in my experience, I go back to actually knowing what is my trauma is, I observing how the trigger forms, I see how this trigger is protecting slash affecting myself, right? But at the same time, we're talking with friends, like which is the life experience they share is way traumatic than myself, right? And these things they still functional. When you're walking on the street of like as I you talk to the homeless, you talk with the people in properties, um, you feel like their life experience is way worse than you, right? And on one side, I feel, oh, I'm so grateful that I'm not experiencing the pain they go through. But also at the same time, I feel, how could I feel traumatized? how could I feel not grateful? How I ever deserve to feel depressed with in comparison more like a minor trauma, right? And also I feel like in some way I hate myself doing this. It's like I also judge people in my head sometimes. Like I would say my experience is experiencing way more hardship than you, and why you have to be such a crybaby, right? And even worse, I feel like the things I now I have fear. I was almost like I feel afraid um, when I was working through life with my friends, with my family, with my loved ones. Do I unintentionally become the source of other people's drama, right? So the question of what makes the experience uh, traumatic to a person, I guess, is the things that popping into my head.
To me, there's no requirement, there's no guideline, there's no scale. Trauma is trauma to whoever experienced it. Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be small, doesn't have to be compared. Um, it's highly individual, right? So no one can compare to another person and say, you know what, just stop being a crybaby, like you said, right?
Mm,
Your trauma means nothing compared to mine,
mm,
right? No, you can't. It doesn't work that way because this is highly personal. You know, this is why the same thing can happen to people and install different triggers. Okay? This has nothing to do with the severity of the so-called trauma.
mm,
Yeah. So, and try to compare this, right? Honestly, a lot of the trauma resolution, PTSD resolution or anxiety or depression or whatever resolution is to compare and say, you know what? If you compare to 100 people, you know, or people on the street or population in general, you shouldn't feel this way. You're the lucky
mm.
ones.
Yeah.
Okay? You never have to, you never go you have never been hungry one day in your life,
Mm,
right? As if that can justify or justify to suppress our emotions or how we feel. No, it doesn't work that way.
mm,
Can you see like this is the healing process? This is the healing protocol. Okay. It's like, oh, you're broken. Then you compare, then you use more judgment to create more issues, right? Because all of a sudden, what you're feeling, what that trauma means to you is false.
mm,
You know, um, and then to me that creates more problem, right? So to me, all trauma are traumas. Okay, all emotions are true to that person. And then the question is, how do we resolve that, right? So by knowing this functional human system, right? By having a different definition, right? For example, you're trying to define trauma, right?
mm,
You're trying to define what trauma or what extent of trauma should cause PTSD, right? There's no there's no such there's no such matrix. There's no such thing. You know, people who went through Holocaust, you know, millions of people went through a Holocaust, you know, and there are some people come out totally different than others. Okay, they essentially went through the same thing, right? So it's not
mm,
the actual thing, right? It's how people perceive, right? How people connect, right? So then we start to say, okay, it's the same stimulus, but depending on the makeup of that person, the existing attributes of that person, right? If the person is, for example, PTSD, if the person is highly visual, already are filled with injustice, already have issue with authority, okay, already are vigilant before they experience, the so-called trauma. They have other trauma or other experiences in their lives, right? Or they have different mentality. They have a different sense of sacrifice, right? So to me, then we have a lot of things to go with, um, to say, okay, how do we really truly put this together, at the personal level? Um, so to me, um, so there are several things, right? One is to say, okay, is my trauma really trauma? And we compare that against others, right? So that to me is one, right?
Mm,
Another is, does my trauma become the trauma for the people I love? Okay.
mm,
Then we sort of, we try to suppress ourselves, right? For example, if my dad abuses me, and I try to be a dad that doesn't abuse um, my own kids, right? And I keep that in mind all the time. Okay. So I have to suppress myself. And then I can't truly be a dad. I cannot be a genuine dad for my kids. Okay. Because I need to, I have this trauma in mind. Right. So it's very interesting how these things are very intertwined, and ultimately to me it's like, how do we resolve it? How can we update our triggers? Um, how can we um, how can we activate our membrane, our heart, right? How can we reveal that we can continue, we can still love unconditionally, right? Actually, one mindset that I missed mentioning is equality. Okay, what's equality in this world? How can, are we equal? You know, how can we be equal? How can we be equal?
mm,
Honestly, to me, the only equality that I can see that everyone has in this world is we all have parents. That's the only equality we have. Okay. To me, there's nothing else. We're all born in different families by different parents, in different social, educational, political status or whatever, right? Different race, different country, different culture. What's equality? So in my system, right, I use this one equality that I can find, okay, and say, okay, since we all have parents, and some people will say, John, you know what? I don't know who my dad was. My mom didn't even know you. They say, but you still have a dad, right? I say, yeah, I do. Just connect to your dad. It doesn't matter who your dad is. Just connect to your dad's heart. Go and love your dad unconditionally and connect to him as if you know him, because you will find a connection. And when you do, you reveal that you still have a heart of gold. And when you do have a heart of gold, all your so-called trauma protection start to crumble, start to become unnecessary. Then the update can proceed. The update is possible now because you don't need that protection, because you can still love. You still have a choice. And to me, that's really the approach um, of my clinic, right? Based on this diagram, the functional human system, because this is the only, to me, we all have this path, okay? That's why I'm very, very hopeful for humanity, because these are functional there. We may feel so broken because of our past, because of trauma, and we so worry about our future, right? So what I really want to share is we can change that right now. I don't know how you feel about this, but this is a well worth time discussion, right?
Yeah, I guess like the just like you mentioned, like the um when you're aware, when you're sometimes actually if you're able to aware your trauma is potentially causing other people's trauma, right? But of course, that would be great. You kind of prevented that front. Um, but also sometimes not, right? Sometimes your trauma already causing others pure trauma, and you feel guilt, you feel guilty, you feel like you are forever in debt uh, to the one you causing trauma to. Then how could you feel like you still have a choice?
Because if
Mm,
I can have trauma and I reveal that I can still love unconditionally, the next person can do that too, right?
yeah.
That's it. That's your answer.
So you believing other people can do that too.
Yeah, because if I,
Hence you don't have to feel guilty.
yes, you can say,
Mm,
I wish I didn't do that.
yeah.
Okay. But you know what? You can still love. I cannot hurt you. You may feel hurt like I felt hurt before, but I guarantee you, you still have a heart of gold. Then we continue to connect to that person's heart of gold. We can have this shame, guilt, this forever torturing ourselves. We can have the feeling to torture ourselves for the rest of our lives. Okay? We can absolutely do that. Or we can continue to connect to that person's heart of gold and love that person unconditionally. Which one would you choose? Which one is more empowering? It's not like, to me, the shame and guilt and everything else, it's the same as our sense of injustice. It's just on the opposite side of the aisle. When we feel like we're being traumatized as a victim, we have such injustice, right?
Mhm,
When we feel we cause other people's trauma, we feel shame and guilty, right?
mhm.
So it becomes a endless loop of equations, right? I mean, it just continues. Continue to judge, right? We judge what we receive and we judge what we give out, right? So again, to me, how do we break that chain, right? Is by saying, I want to reveal, okay, I want to love unconditionally from this point on. I have done things I wish I could take back, but there's no taking back. But from this point on, I change. And because we change, the people who we hurt potentially, right, who feel like they are the victim of us, right? Um, we reconfirm that they have a heart of gold. We reconfirm that this is what I'm going to connect to you. This is how I'm going to connect to you for the rest of my life. I will continue to connect to you unconditionally. This is my approach. Okay. I had the same condition. I have 4 kids. Okay. And I know I have done things um, that probably hurt them. Okay. Whether it's willingly or unwillingly. And I also know the things that I caused, what, what these things installed in them, right? I can't change it. This is why I can't help people, right? But the connection is there. If you have hurt somebody, or if I have hurt somebody, that means we have a connection. I can continue that connection to be, the hurtful connection and then evolve into a shameful, regretful connection, or I can change that to say, no, I know you, I care about you, I love you. My love for you was conditional, but you know what? My love for you from this point on will be unconditional. To me, it's a choice, right?
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage, but yes,
Yeah.
definitely it's a choice. Yeah.
And to me, it's a choice. I can go down a road where honestly, if you go down the other road, right? I have gone down the other road before, right? If you want to escape, you can't be, honestly, to live in shame and guilt. It's very, very difficult. You have to escape. And the way to escape, these infinite shame and guilt loop is oftentimes addiction.
Or escapism in general. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because you can't I mean, you can't do anything about it,
Mhm.
right? And yet you feel really, really awful about it. And the protection is escape. Honestly, when I work with addiction, people with addiction, that's exactly the mechanism. They have a really, really bad, um, they often have a very, very, very poor view of themselves, that they have hurt people, hurt the ones they love, and they're trying to remove the evil part in them. And guess what? They do it again and again and again. But deep down, they don't want to do it. So every time they do this, they have this, they compound the guilt and shame, which they need to escape even further. So to me, that's the endless cycle of addiction. So addiction to me is not a disorder either. Addiction um, is self-medication essentially. So a lot of times, honestly, like guilt and shame seems to be the right thing to do, right? But when you look at it um, uh, from a different angle, it's like it's not empowering for anybody. Okay, it seems to be the moral thing to do, right? You ask for apology, you ask for forgiveness, you apologize, you do this over and over and over and over and over again. Um, but to me, honestly, when the person feel, um, you know, injustice cannot be resolved by um, apologies, okay, because something wrong was done. Again, it's like Humpty Dumpty, right? It's broken into pieces. So to me, the key really is reveal, right? Reveal that we can still love unconditionally. And again, I went through that. I'm sure many people went through that, right? We all have regrets, um, things we want to take back in life, right? Um, but it doesn't work that way. Has never worked that way. It will never work that way. So to me, the new way to work this, right? The a much better way for humanity to move on, right, is to change our, this well-established moral code, or, this positive, negative emotions, or there's a set of knowledge that everyone should follow, and we need to, it doesn't, and we need to get away from that. We need to change it a little bit. We need to really be, again, using our critical analytical mind, right? And really look at these things. It's like, yeah, that's what I used to trust. That's what I used to do. That's what I used to follow. How did it work out? Yeah. Thanks, Albert.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
thanks.
thank you, John. I feel like, today's conversation, I feel like it will have a lot to chew on. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, honestly, ultimately, the question I ask myself is, what's the most empowering thing I can do right now? Yeah. And when I ask myself that question enough times, something different happens. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. We do have to remember, keep asking ourselves that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to see other people suffer. It's very difficult to see our loved ones suffer. They get stuck in their loop and then couldn't get out. And we feel a lot of times highly responsible for it, right? What do we do at that point? What do we do then? My solution has been, I will love you regardless of anything. That's all I'm gonna do. I will love you unconditionally. I will connect to you every time I think of you. And why? Because that to me is the most empowering thing I can do at the moment. Yeah. Any other comments? Very cool. Okay, so that will be for today. Next, we will continue to Tuina and other. I think we covered the bulk of MCA. Um, we'll cover a few more things, and we'll go to cases, and we'll try to put things together, and then hopefully at that time, we can all share the things that we care about and see if there's different ways to look at it from MCA standpoint. Thank you. I'll see you
Thank
guys
you,
next
John.
week. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And
Thank you.
I'm digesting
Yeah, yeah, quite a yeah.
or
Um,
ingesting.
yeah.
So,
Hopefully you'll find it um, to me yeah, to me this is something that when we map our life experiences,
yeah,
hopefully it makes sense, right?
it's making sense. And I appreciate the golden heart and connecting that if we're connected to different people in life, connecting heart, sorry, my dog, but anyway, rather than to the situations, but just going to our heart and bringing in love. So I appreciate that. And thanks. Anyway, I'm going to turn this off so my dog won't.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. So yeah, to me this again is just doing what's most empowering. Okay, it's um, yeah, um, and have the sense of being a lighthouse rather than a candle in the wind, right? Because and I can see, and I can easily remember, you know, feeling like a candle in the wind many, 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 many nights. Um, and until I choose to say, I want to be a lighthouse. I don't want to live like a candle in the wind anymore, where other people's reaction, um, or my expectation, I just keep keep blowing my light out, right? Then I have to, like Albert said, escape. Right? Yeah. All right. See you guys next week. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you guys come on.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Everyone.